Today in Draw My Life, the lost episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Does anyone remember the SpongeBob episode, The Sponge Who Could Fly, that aired in March 2003? It was dubbed The Lost Episode, based on the storyline where Patchy the Pirate uses a treasure map to find the SpongeBob episode that he lost. That night I saw something that wasn't exactly what I expected to see. I still don't understand the reason why the producers make these episodes. But whatever their reason, their ultimate goal is that they don't get released and remain lost. Sadly, what I experienced the night before the episode aired was something out of the ordinary. I remember I was sick with some kind of virus. I was vomiting almost every 5 minutes, and I felt too ill to fall asleep, so I stayed up and watched TV. Around 2:30 a.m., my stomach started to settle, so I planned to turn off the TV and get some sleep. But as I was reaching for the remote control, the opening for the SpongeBob TV show started playing. SpongeBob was my favorite show at that time, so I couldn't miss out on watching it. Although, I thought it was kind of weird that they were showing SpongeBob in the middle of the night. When the opening began, I noticed the animation wasn't finished. There were moments where the characters froze or moved unnaturally. Also, for some reason, the theme song was playing backwards. It made me a little uncomfortable, but also intrigued because it's not very often to see flaws like this one in well-known shows. The title card read, Lost Episode, so I figured that there was a mistake, and Nickelodeon was accidentally airing The Sponge Who Could Fly. The episode started with SpongeBob sitting on his bed, slouched and looking downward with a joyless look. He definitely didn't look as energetic as he always does. SpongeBob is so optimistic all the time. Why would he be acting like this? After about 10 seconds of seeing SpongeBob like this, he let out a big sigh, then looked over to his bedside barrel, and the screen zoomed in on a bottle that was sitting beside his clock. Once the screen zoomed in close enough to read the text on the bottle, it showed that it was a bottle of vodka. The show then panned to a scene with a much brighter contrast, showing SpongeBob taking a shot of vodka, then running off smiling and laughing as always. The fact that SpongeBob had to drink alcohol to be, well, himself, made me feel uneasy. Mainly because alcohol isn't something that should be taken lightly, and that you would especially not expect to find in a kid's cartoon. The screen then flipped back to the original scene of SpongeBob looking distressed, while at the same time changing the contrast back to the darker one. The screen froze on SpongeBob for a few seconds, then flickered to a new scene. SpongeBob was walking around his living room as he tumbled and knocked things over around him. It seems like he had drunk so much that he couldn't keep himself straight. Everything around him was a mess. There were empty pizza boxes on the floor, cans of beer, and every kind of trash laying around. Gary was also under a pile of garbage. He looked dehydrated and neglected as if he had not eaten anything in days. As SpongeBob was walking around with the bottle of vodka in his hand, someone knocked on the door. As SpongeBob was heading for the door, he lost his balance and fell to the ground. He opened the door and it was Squidward, who immediately started complaining about the noise. He said that his fuss prevented him from practicing the clarinet. SpongeBob began to mumble, and Squidward couldn't understand a word he was saying. Squidward started to yell, complaining about SpongeBob's drinking problems. You could tell that SpongeBob was losing his cool. Squidward continued yelling that he had had enough of many years of putting up with his stupidity. Immediately after SpongeBob heard the word stupidity, he looked Squidward in the eyes and said, "I'm the one who was tired of you." He quickly swung the bottle in his hand and smashed it in his face. SpongeBob struck him so hard that the shards of glass had stuck in his face. Squidward screamed in pain, but quickly stood up and with the tip of his clarinet, knocked out SpongeBob's both teeth. Streams of blood started shooting out of his gums. SpongeBob fell to the ground and in desperation, he looked around for any rest of the broken bottle. He found a large piece and grabbed it with his bare hands, hurting himself. He lunged at Squidward and cut off all of his legs. He fell to the ground and smashed Gary. Splashes of blood painted the walls. SpongeBob stood still for a while and then lost his mind. The adrenaline kicked in, and SpongeBob didn't seem drunk anymore. His eyes turned black, and blood started dripping from his mouth. He climbed on top of Squidward, and a deep voice came out of his mouth. "This is for killing Gary," and began to hit him as hard as he could. Squidward started yelling, begging him to stop, and that it wasn't his fault. SpongeBob ignored the screams and smashed his face. With each punch, the shards of glass pierced in his face got deeper and deeper into his skin. There was blood everywhere. After a few seconds, the screams ceased, and SpongeBob took the last few swings and stopped to take a breath. The adrenaline went away, and he realized what he had done. He stood there for a while, trying to deal with the blood scene. He started shaking Squidward to wake him up, but sadly it was pointless. He had killed him. SpongeBob panicked and screamed in tears, "What have I done?" He stayed there crying. The image faded to black. The next scene showed SpongeBob at his desk with a cigarette in his hand, a piece of paper, and a pencil. He had red eyes, dark eye bags, and looked exhausted as if he hadn't slept for days. Instead of staying at one contrast, the colors kept on flickering from light to dark. SpongeBob gripped the pencil in his hand and began to write on the paper, reading what he was writing. "I can't take it anymore," he said. As soon as he got that sentence out, a faint noise started playing in the background. It sounded like a child crying. The noise continued playing as SpongeBob continued writing. "My life has been horrible and it hasn't gotten better. I can't move on. All I can think about is a mistake that ruined my life. If I had listened to you and put the drinking aside, nothing would have happened. I want to ask for your forgiveness, but I can't. I can't even forgive myself." SpongeBob stopped writing and started weeping loudly. The screen froze for a few seconds, then the show continued with SpongeBob writing his final words. The contrast stayed dark, and the cries stopped. It was absolute silence, except for SpongeBob saying, "Goodbye." SpongeBob quickly stood up, grabbed a gun he had in the desk. He pointed the gun at his forehead and took a long sigh. A shot was heard, and SpongeBob collapsed onto the floor and lay there motionless until the screen turned to static. Needless to say, I was scared out of my mind, and sleep was out of the question. Recently, I've been looking for this episode all over the internet, but not even one website seems to have it. If you ever recognize this episode, please contact me as soon as possible. If you are watching this, please be careful with where you download pirate episodes. Let us know in the comments what you think of this lost episode, and what other show you would like us to ruin for you. Before you go, remember to subscribe. See you later!